Welcome to the Clean Library Podcast, where content meets conscience. We believe there are millions of you readers out there desperately searching for a better way to find clean content. Each episode, we will introduce you to a new author of clean books, giving you, your family, and your friends clean options.
Hello, I'm Marcus Williams, and I'm here with co-host Brock Morris, and today we have our special guest author, Katrina Lyman Jones. Katrina has always loved writing and considers it her first passion after Jesus. She reads constantly, and while she loves many different genres, her favorite is historical fiction because of all there is to learn about events in history and how people throughout time dealt with difficulty. She holds a BA of English teaching from Utah State University, and while raising her children over the past 20 years, has lived in Arizona, Ohio, and Utah. Currently, she resides in southern Utah with her wonderful husband and 5 children, where she loves her faith, gardening, and being a flutist in the Southwest Symphony. Welcome, Katrina. Thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So before we get started, we need to get into your 2 truths and a lie. And we introduced Steve last time.
That's right.
He's our scorekeeper. You can see that Brock is up 5-4. So let me read those and I'll see if I can catch up today. All right. Number 1, met her husband at a writing conference. Number 2, has never been outside the United States. And number 3, loves learning about health and nutrition. So, met her husband at a writing conference, never been outside the U.S., loves learning about health and nutrition. All right, so we'll try to see if we can figure those out as we're talking today, and then we'll guess at the end. Let's see if we get it right this time.
Indeed.
Okay, awesome. So, Katrina, you're an English major, so I'm assuming you love words and the language and everything, but how did you get into writing fiction?
I don't think my story is very unique for writers because I started writing when I was in the 2nd grade. My teacher would have us write in class, and I found that I liked it so much I'd ask my mom to help me do it outside of class, and pretty soon I was filling up notebooks with my little stories. And then when I was 12, I decided to start writing my first historical fiction novel, which took me until I was about 19 because so much research was involved. And so I learned some really good skills there with writing and with research, and then just kept going.
Awesome. So I don't want to ask you your age, but as a 12-year-old, how did you go about doing your research? How did you know how to do that?
Mostly I think because of the questions that I had. I wanted to be accurate. I didn't want to make up anything because I knew this really happened. My first book was about pioneers, and so I wanted to make sure that I had all those facts straight. And so I just used books that we had at home that I could find, and I could have gone to the library. I don't remember if I did that. I think mostly I just used the resources from home.
Awesome.
At that point.
So is that book something that you want to bring back someday, and actually publish, or that's to stay at home on the shelf type thing?
I don't know. I probably would pull it out sometime. It's been a long time since I've looked at it. I'm sure my writing has developed a lot since then,
Yeah.
But it was a compelling story. There are just a lot of pioneer stories already, so I'd have to see where that could take me.
Yeah.
Now research has been a topic a couple of times in our discussions here. Do you have any tips and tricks about how you approach research now, or maybe how that process has evolved for you as you dive into looking at how do you come up with the stories? How do you research, especially if you're tying in real life scenarios or places, people, so on and so forth?
That process definitely has evolved over time with the internet, because when I started, there was no internet.
Right.
So now most of my research is done online, but I also like to supplement with print books. But mostly I go to what I can find online because there's just so much available. And then I can check different sites that have the same information and make sure that it's all the same, that it's consistent. So I always have lots of questions and there's lots of answers to find. So that's helpful.
Yeah.
digging through the internet. That's always a go-to. Have you ever gone to any of the locales that your books are based from?
Yes, and this book that is out, that I published last year, I actually lived, well, as my bio said, I lived in Ohio, and the book takes place in Ohio. So I've been to all of, yeah, I've been to all the places that are mentioned in my book, which was really very helpful because you can only get so far in your imagination.
Yeah, pulling from real life experience. That's great.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember as a kid, like I would check the encyclopedia out from the library and just devour articles, and then I would write book reports just for fun on
That's
these
cool.
topics. which
That's great.
which yeah.
Tells us a lot about you,
Yeah, it
Marcus, I think,
does.
just in that one statement. Yeah.
Yeah, I read encyclopedias and wrote reports. And I mean,
Right.
when you go to your grade teacher and ask if you can write a book report on a topic from an encyclopedia, what is she going to say? No.
No, right.
Right.
But so tell us about this book. Tell us a little bit more what it's about, the one that you've published.
Okay. Well, it takes place in 1901 in Oberlin, Ohio, which has a really rich history of the Underground Railroad and of education for everyone, including all the races and the genders. And so that was really compelling to me. But the fictional story is about a girl named Samantha and a boy named Sterling, and how she has always been a recluse and neglected and lives life through books that she finds in her father's library. And then she meets Sterling, who's a young writing teacher at the college, and he sees in her something that nobody's ever seen before, which is potential, and asks her if she would be interested in starting writing lessons with him, which she's not really interested, but he has an intriguing premise, and so she decides to try it and ends up falling in love with writing and really excelling, and just about the development of their relationship. And then when Sterling leaves, of Samantha finding out about her family through her mother's journal, and finding God and connecting with people, and just a coming of age novel for both her and Sterling.
Oh, okay. And Oberlin College, that's a historical college, right? Like
Yes,
I've heard.
it is.
Okay. And is that the college where he's teaching? That
Yes.
historical?
Mhm.
Cool. So as an author who's made a choice to make your story clean, because as you know, when you're building a relationship between two people, you have a choice to decide what direction that relationship is going to go and how it's going to look and how you're going to write it. Why did you make the decision to keep the focus of your book, clean?
Well, first of all, I try to keep myself and my mind clean, and so it doesn't really occur to me to write otherwise. But there did come a point as I was writing the second book, which will be coming out this year, where I made that conscious decision. And like a lot of your other authors have said, I thought about who would be reading my novels, which would include my family and the people that know me. And I didn't want them to be embarrassed or surprised. I wanted it to be consistent with who I am and who my books are, and for people to know that they can trust what they read.
Yeah. And I could see, like, if I was playing devil's advocate, I guess I could see someone arguing that, well, then you're just censoring yourself because you don't want to be shamed by the people around you. But I don't think that's what it is at all. Like, that from your explanation, I don't think, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's more like you want to give them a story that they can read rather than you're keeping stuff out to avoid embarrassment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly. And I've had people come up to me since then that have said, wow, your book was really clean, and like they were surprised, and say, I want my kids to read this, or I could have my niece read this. And I've kind of been surprised by their surprise, because those are the kind of books that I try to read.
Yeah.
And I know there are a lot out there. And so I'm just helping to continue that, because I think it's really important that we talk about all sorts of things, but we don't need to do it in a way that's going to be embarrassing or have dirty things in them.
Yeah, and it's almost like, wait a minute, you're surprised I kept it clean? Like, what did you expect from me?
Exactly.
You know, like, don't you know me?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So when you say the word clean, what does that mean to you? Because we've had authors who don't really know and are kind of trying to figure that out. Some who have very, very strict definitions of that. So for you, what does that mean?
I prefer minimal bad language, and I prefer minimal violence, although I can tolerate violence if it doesn't get very graphic.
Mm-hmm.
And no sex scenes. Just to be really honest, I don't watch PG-13 or R. And so for me, it's anything PG.
Gotcha. Okay. And when you said in the second book where you had to make that conscious decision, did you find it challenging to write that scene in a way that was clean, like trying to find the words and the descriptors that really brought the emotion and the imagery, while still keeping it clean? Did you find that challenging in that situation?
No, I don't think so, because that's what I'm used to already.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it does, as other authors have said on here, I think it does take a higher level of skill to be able to write certain things in a clean way and still get the message across. But I haven't had trouble with that.
Yeah. Yeah. So for this book particularly, where did this idea come from for the story?
I don't really know. I started having the idea when I think I was first or second year of college. I was supposed to actually be writing an English paper. I was always in the lab writing papers, but I had this compelling creative idea that I just had to get down because it was driving me nuts. And so I started it, and it began as a short story, which lengthened over time, and the ideas just kept coming. But I didn't actually know until I moved to Ohio that it took place in Ohio. I knew what it looked like,
Mm-hmm.
what it smelled like, and all of that, but I didn't know where that was until I got there. So that
Interesting.
was really interesting.
So kind of a this is the place moment. Was it like that sudden that you got there and were like, whoa, this is where the book happened, or was it over time getting to know the people in the area that it kind of formed in your
I
mind?
don't remember if it happened as soon as I got there, because there was a lot to figure out when we got there. But there was a point where all of a sudden it hit me, and I realized this is the place. So it was cool.
That is cool. That's we've talked to a lot of authors who have characters who have dictated a lot, but I think that's the first time I've heard someone say that the actual location spoke to them about the story, where the story happened first and then the location presented itself almost. So that's very interesting. That's cool. Um, so writing this, you said there's a book 2. Is this going? Do you already know is there going to be a 3, 4, 5? How long the series is going to be? Or
Yeah, there will be a book 3. I don't
yeah.
plan to go past that, or I get into World War I, and I don't really want to get into that. So
Okay. Yeah, a whole other historical time period, really.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, what for you as someone who has one book out? What's your biggest challenge of being seen or getting yourself out there in the marketplace?
This is going to sound funny, but the hardest thing about being seen is being seen. um, I knew there were a lot of authors and a lot of books out there because I read all the time, and
Mm-hmm.
there are always way more books to read than I can get to. But it wasn't until my first book was published, that I realized just how many authors there are.
Yeah.
And that I was just this little tiny drop in the bucket. And so that was really kind of disheartening and overwhelming. But I think just there are always new ways to market, and just to keep trying and do little things consistently. I'm hoping that over time, I'll become more visible. And it really helps when people leave reviews. That helps increase the visibility too.
So do you have an ARC team of people who are willing to read the books and leave reviews?
I have gotten several reviews for the first book. And then for the second book, I'm trying to get an ARC team together right now to before that is published. It should only, I think I'll have it ready in just a few weeks. So I'm hoping to get that ARC team together pretty quick here.
Cool. So where do you go? Like if someone is interested in being on your ARC team, where should we send them?
I have a Facebook page and an Instagram page. I'm part of a Facebook group that does ARC teams. And so that's where I'll probably get most of them from. But on Facebook, it's author Katrina Lyman Jones, and on Instagram, author Katrina Jones. So I can be contacted either of those ways.
Awesome. And
Now,
go ahead.
Yeah. So for those of us who aren't authors, can you give us a little bit more background on what an ARC team is? So I hear that term and I think I can sort of, assume, but what does that really mean?
So that's just a group of readers that are willing to read a book before it comes out and give feedback and leave a review. And in this case, they leave the review right about the time the book officially comes out. So that helps increase visibility and helps people know if it's good or not.
Got it. So more than just like when we hear beta readers, but this is also a team that's also going to review the book objectively and try to give some visibility to it that way. Got it.
Right.
Yeah, and to clarify, these people are not paid. There's no benefit to them other they love reading and they're willing to write a review.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Have you had good luck with people who've signed up to read actually leaving reviews and following through, or has that been a challenge?
Actually, this is the first time I've done that, so I have yet to find out.
We'll see how it goes. Yeah. It can be tough. I mean, in my experience, for the most part, people have been really good about it, but they're doing it for free. They're doing it out of the kindness of their heart. So and life gets in the way. So hopefully you have a good team who follow through and are, because you're right, those reviews are really important. And I think that's something not just for ARC team members, but for any listeners out there who are readers. It's a big deal based on the algorithms and the way Amazon pushes things to the top page and their ordering and all that stuff. The more reviews you have, the higher it's going to be. So if you are a reader and you love books and you're willing to take 5 minutes, don't just leave a star, that's not helpful, but just a couple sentences, love the book or engaging story, whatever you thought of the book. It's super helpful to authors and probably the most helpful thing you can do. I don't want to say even beyond buying the book, because that's always nice. The money's nice, but really in the grand scope of being seen as an author and building your readership, those reviews are almost more important than the purchase. I don't know.
Yes, they are so important. And it's interesting. I think the stats say that about 10% leave reviews, and that's it. And so that's really hard as authors, because we know just a small percentage are going to leave reviews. But I've been really, really grateful for each one that I get. And I think for other readers, it's also helpful because as you've discussed on the show before, it's hard to know what's in books because there is no rating system. And so the more reviews people leave that are really honest and talk about if there's anything in there they didn't appreciate, the more other readers are aware of what is actually happening in those books.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see a lot of reviews where they kind of do a synopsis of the story, which isn't super helpful because we already have that. No. But the actual opinion on the content and the style and whether there are things that might be objectionable to some or not, those are the really helpful things for other readers, because as an author, you love to get 4 or 5 star reviews. That's great. It feels good. It's validation. But honestly, reviews are for readers. They're not for authors. They're for other readers to choose. And as a byproduct, they help the authors, find new readers, but they're really designed to help other readers choose books. So
Yes, I agree.
yeah, that's an important thing to keep in mind. So I mean, I was guilty before I published my first book. I was guilty too. I never left reviews. I didn't take the time. But now that I know their importance, I try to always, especially with indie authors, I try to always leave a review, unless if it's a book that I couldn't finish or really was objectionable to me, then maybe I won't. But otherwise, now I know the importance of it, so I make a note of it. And I was guilty of not doing that in the past, so I totally understand both perspectives.
Yeah, very much a call to action for any of our fans here, and I think we've seen this multiple times, especially for independent authors, right? So there is a game to be played. I mean, let's not try to pull the wool over anybody's eyes here, as you mentioned, Marcus. Right? There's algorithms out there, and so you want objective, you want truthful, you want to be able to trust the reviews. But if you're a reader and you're reading a good book, go and leave a review, just as Marcus had said, because without that, you can't. It's very difficult to compete in the marketplace, right? As an independent author, we've heard just about every author talk about the struggles with marketing and how do you get visibility. And Katrina, you mentioned all those same things. So I think that's a real important thing. Like, you have to get teams together, and if you're a reader, go out and review. Otherwise, it's an uphill battle, it sounds like.
Yeah, for sure. So, Katrina, are you self-published?
Yes, I
Okay.
published on Amazon.
Great. I assumed that, but I realized I hadn't actually asked you, so I need to make sure that I know that for sure. So how is that process for you, the figuring out all the different aspects of how to do that?
It's definitely been overwhelming. I've learned a lot over the past year or so, but the first book, I went about things differently than I will go about the second book. So there's always things to learn and figure out. Okay, I don't want to do it that way again. Let's do it this other way instead.
Mm-hmm. So is it available only on Amazon right now, or do you have it wide at other places as well?
I think it's only on Amazon.
Okay.
At the moment. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And was, as part of that, like figuring out the cover design and layout and all that stuff, did you hire any of that out, or did you do all that yourself?
So that was part of what I did differently last time versus this time. Last time I had an Amazon team do all of that. And some things they did really great in, and other things were incredibly frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
And so this time I opted to hire an artist and somebody to do the cover. And I hired an editor that I could work with personally. And that allowed me to manipulate what I wanted to and leave alone what I didn't, which wasn't the case when I worked with Amazon. And so yeah, it's just a really big learning process, but things have gone more smoothly this second time around for sure.
Awesome. So working with an Amazon team, once they made changes, you were forced into that?
They would make the changes, and then I had to tell them if I wanted them changed back or if I wanted something different. And so that editing process just took forever. And initially, it was so frustrating because I was working with people who I'm pretty sure had less education than me.
Yeah.
And so they didn't recognize some of the vocabulary, the Bible references, and different things like that. And so they finally sent me up to the top editor of Amazon, and she was much more helpful, but it just was not a very seamless process.
Wow. I didn't even know you could hire Amazon to do that. That sounds frustrating, especially as an English major. Like, you knew what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And you're having someone who's supposed to be an expert, and you're basically coaching them on how to do the job you've hired them to do.
Exactly. That's what I kept thinking. Why am I paying you money to teach you to do your job? I already know my job.
Yeah, maybe you should be hiring me to be your coach to do your job.
Exactly. Yes.
That's interesting. We haven't talked to anyone who's used that service before, so that's interesting. So the editor that you have now, where did you find that person?
I actually found her through a mentor that I have who's another indie author.
Mm-hmm.
And he worked with her and really liked her a lot. So I reached out and really enjoyed the interactions that we had together. And I felt like she would respect my experience and my skill and not try and change my story or
Yeah.
any of that. She just was trying to help what I already had. And she's very knowledgeable. So she knows all the rules that I have forgotten or that have changed since I was in college.
Yeah.
And so that's been really helpful.
Yeah. Um, my editor is just recently graduated from editing and publishing, and there are like even length of paragraphs, length of sentences, all that is different now based on what readers want, what they're willing to read, and it's much different than when I learned. And for me, my editing process is almost live because we use an online document, so I can see the changes immediately. I can accept them. I can fix them. We can comment back and forth. So it's a very collaborative effort, and that's because that's the way I like it. That works the best for me. So I think it's important to find that editor who works within your style and also has the experience and knowledge. And those people are out there. It's just a matter of finding the one that is the right fit, like anything else.
Yeah, exactly. And I did go through a couple of other options and just wasn't the same. I needed that good connection and collaboration like you're talking about. So I'm glad that I found who I did.
So for other authors out there looking to find that relationship, that editor, what are your recommendations of kind of screening or figuring out the right fit?
The ones that I worked with, they let me send them a short manuscript, like a page or two, and then they just gave me a sample edit. And that was really helpful to see what they would actually be looking for and how they would correct it. And that really gave me a good idea of if I wanted to work with them or not.
Yeah. And they didn't charge for that.
Right.
Yeah.
It was all free.
Okay. So yeah, I think that's important. If you're looking for an editor out there and they don't want to do a sample, they refuse to do a sample, or they want to charge you for the sample, I think that's probably a red flag of someone that you want to avoid. And then, depending on your timeline and everything, another thing you want to look at is responsiveness. You're able to connect with them, maybe even because, you could hire someone all over the world, but is the ability to communicate live important to you, or are you willing to wait till their next business day if they're across the world, that kind of thing. So all considerations to take into account. How about cover design? You said you hired an artist this time?
Yeah, I did. I want to, of course, make all 3 books, consistent with my brand. And so it actually wasn't as hard as I thought. I showed him a picture of the first one and told him what I wanted in the second one. And he did a really great job. So I was very pleased.
Cool. And how did you find him?
I found him on Fiverr.
Okay. Yeah, that's tons of people there, and it's a great resource. But again, I think when you're hiring someone you don't know, so it is good to screen them. Maybe ask for samples of their work, or do they have a portfolio of other books, designs and stuff like that before.
Right, and on Fiverr you can see examples of their previous art, which is really helpful. So I actually wanted to hire somebody before him, and I told her what I wanted, and she ended up saying, sorry, I can't do that. So then I went back to the drawing board and I found this other guy. Yeah.
Well, that's great that you found someone who was honest with you and cared about their reputation, and because that's those sites, that's what they're built on, is your rating and your reputation. So that's important. So have you thought at all about audiobooks?
I've thought a lot about audiobooks, and I haven't had the money to do them yet, but that's a goal of mine. I would love to get to that point.
Yeah. have you thought about narrating yourself, or is that you're like, nah?
I don't really like reading my own stuff, so
Yeah. Well, the biggest critic of anyone's voice is themselves. So
yeah.
absolutely. And it's, there are different options. We've had authors who used Audible, where they have a it's free option, although you're in a contract for a set period of time, with Audible. We had one who specifically looked for college theatrical students who were willing to take less money to build their resume. So but it can be super expensive. Like even that, when you're talking about 9 hours, 10-hour book at a per finished hour rate, that's a big upfront cost for something that's going to take a long time to recoup.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know, especially readers who haven't been involved. I don't know if they realize how small the royalties actually are per book. So, say if you spend $3,000 to get your book published, to get to $3,000, the number of people you have to get to listen to the book is a lot. It's pretty huge. So it's almost, because I'm in the same situation with some of mine I've narrated, but others I would like to hire, and it's that same situation, right? It's almost looking at it as like, is this an investment, or is this just a sunk cost because I want to do it and I want to make it available?
Right.
And this is not to say that narrators shouldn't get paid that rate, because it's a talent.
No.
Like, it's a skill and a talent for
sure.
sure. But is there, I don't know, I guess the question is there a system or a possibility of changing the way that this market works to make it work better for authors and narrators?
Good question.
Yeah, the big question. And maybe for someone with a business degree rather than my degree.
There's a lot of disruption happening though in the industry in general. So somebody will figure something out, I think, at some point, to say, let's create some scenario that makes it an easier entry point into narration and getting an audiobook out than currently exists. Because it just feels, to all the points that have been said, it just feels so challenging to get past. So
yeah, and you make a good point. I was thinking about that too, from the time that I first wrote my book and wanted it to be published until now, 10 years later. So much has changed in the industry just in publishing books. So down the road, hopefully audiobooks will become easier as well.
Yeah, that would be awesome. So do you have any plans beyond this series, or
I've had ideas. Mm-hmm. I plan to keep going, but I feel like I don't get a ton of ideas until I finish what I'm working on currently. So I'm just focusing on that right now.
Maybe you'll travel to Europe and that'll inspire a new story.
There you go. That'd be nice.
Or maybe you already have. All right, that wasn't very subtle. Sorry.
Smooth.
So is there, over this 10-year journey of getting that first book published, is there something that your current self would like to tell 10 years ago self, advice or wisdom?
Yeah. I think I would tell myself to keep going and not give up, which I did keep going. But I would also tell myself there are different stages in life and you don't have to do everything all at once. Mm-hmm. And I think I kind of felt like that when I got to the point where it was done and I was a mom and my husband was in grad school and we were living off nothing and I was trying to get the book published, just feeling like if it didn't get published then maybe it never would. Mm-hmm. I would tell myself, there's a stage for everything and things will happen when they're supposed to, and it's okay to focus on just a couple things at a time, and just different opportunities present themselves later on.
Yeah. little bit of patience, a little bit of faith.
Yeah.
And I guess with historical fiction, it's a little bit easier as well. Whereas I've got one where from the beginning, the technology I used in the beginning, by the time I published it, I had to go through and change it because that was old.
Yeah.
that,
True.
that was annoying. But yeah. So do you have any clean authors that you would recommend to our listeners?
I do. There are so many out there. A classic, well, I love the classics, but a classic, more modern writer is Jan Karon. She writes a Mitford series that's just delightful. So many people in the town and all the different things that happen in their lives. And I just love that whole series. And then another Christian author that I really like is Lynn Austin. She's wrote a great variety of books, many of them historical fiction. Meddy Ivy Harrison, she's really fun as well, and she's written a lot of fantasy novels. And as I recall, they're all clean. Douglas Sharp is an indie author that I've only read his first book in this series, but it was quite intriguing and clean. Brandon Mole, which has been mentioned before, he writes young adult fantasy, and he's super fun. I've really enjoyed a lot of Dean Hughes books. He's a prolific writer. Those are fun. And then my very favorite author right now is another Christian historical fiction writer, Joanna Davidson Politano. And her books are just so beautiful and so well researched, and I just enjoy every sentence. So those are a few.
Awesome. We are working on creating this list for everyone so they can reference it. And it sounds like, Brandon, if you're out there, you need to be on the show because you keep getting recommended.
Absolutely. Yeah. All the time.
We need to talk to you now.
This was a great conversation with the author Katrina Lyman Jones. Unfortunately, we had some technical difficulties at the end where we went into her true truth and a lie. However, I think Brock did that on purpose, really, because he didn't want me to catch up with him. But I'm going to tell you how it went anyway. We'd already gotten her recommendations, and so we were essentially finished with the interview. So thankfully, the interview finished before we started experiencing the technical difficulties. So let me remind you about her two truths and a lie. One was that she met her husband at a writing conference. 2, has never been outside of the United States. And 3, loves learning about health and nutrition. So after much thought and deliberation, Brock decided that number 3 was the lie. Loves learning about health and nutrition. He thought she was lying about that. Well, because I was still behind, I needed to go out on a limb and pick something different. So I picked number 1, that she met her husband at a writing conference. And lo and behold, I was correct. So we updated Steve. It is now 5-5. We are tied up in our two truths and a lie department. But we would like to thank Katrina for spending that time with us. It was a great conversation. We had a lot of fun getting to know her. So please check out her work and check out her recommendations. We're building a great list of clean authors that you can look forward to reading. So please subscribe, hit the notification bell, share with your friends, whatever platform you are on. We're so grateful that you're here, and we look forward to talking to more authors, creators, narrators, and even influencers in the future. So thank you so much for watching or listening to the Clean Library Podcast, and we will catch you next time.